Hi everybody, I'm Daniel. I'm back again on the workbench doing some testing. Now, as some of you may know, I'm in the middle of building my glider. And you know, as you go along, sometimes you have to make decisions about what kind of equipment you want to put in. Not just the glider itself, but the entire system. So part of the whole FPV setup, of course, is the receiver. And what I have here is the Comtech receiver, very popular. Well, actually it's the Lawmate receiver, sold as the Lawmate, but inside it uses the Comtech receiver module, and that's really popular. It's probably one of the most popular units going around. A lot of people carry this. I have two of this, and they've served me well, but it's getting a little bit long in the tooth. I also have this unit here. Now this one is relatively newer compared to that one. And this one is carried by Intelligent Flight. They have this, also a very compact small receiver. Alright, and of course we do have a lot of choices by way of Chinese brands. You know, some stuff coming up from China, you can get them off eBay. This particular one we'll talk a little bit more later on. So what we're going to do now in this test is we're going to put all these three to the test and just compare some basic stuff like sensitivity and maybe the picture quality. I have to say that I don't have a spectrum analyzer on hand, so we're not going to get that sort of detailed results. I'm going to try and get one in the lab this week or so. We'll see about that, maybe after Christmas. But for now, we're just going to do some basic tests with this, and we'll see how that goes. Alright, we're going to just start with the Lawmate receiver, the Comtech receiver if you like. And well, you know, there's the SMA connector, and you can put the antenna. It comes with an antenna, so you'll be able to screw that right in like this. Now this is good because you know, you can always remove this and put some other sort of antenna, maybe a higher gain antenna, maybe a patch antenna, or maybe just a LNA amplifier, preamplifier for this. And on this side, what you see here is you actually get a series of dip switches, right? You have 1 to 8, and with every switch that you put down, that will determine the channel that you will receive your signal on. Now what happens if you put two channels? Let's say you put, now I've got channel 4 selected. Right now I'm going to just put another two channels down. So now I've got 4, 6 and 7 selected. Now what's happening is that there's a little microcontroller inside that will scan this channel. So it's going to stay on each channel for, say, maybe half a second or so, or half a second to 1 second. So you go 4, 6, 7, 4, 6, 7. So it will do that. Now this is really handy if you are actually you know, doing some sort of security surveillance type of application. For FPV, you probably don't want that. Alright, so for FPV, what you really want to do, you'll keep it on the one channel where you have everything set up on. Alright, now it comes with a AV out, so you can see that it has a special 3.5 mm jack which goes to a cable. And that cable will bring out your mono audio, just one channel of audio, and also your video, right? So you do need to have that special cable. And of course over here you have the 12 volts. This thing will probably run down to about 8, maybe 9 volts. So this is the basic setup of the Comtech receiver. Next up we have the Intelligent Flight receiver. Now this one also goes by different names. Some of them look the same, I'm told, but you know, performance wise a little bit different. Now this is a little bit nicer in terms of the back panel. You have this RCA jacks here, RCA sockets here, so that's convenient. You do not need an extra cable. You can plug whatever it is you want right in here. Alright, you have the 12 volts jack. This will also run down to probably about 8-9 volts, right? And you have a switch. Not absolutely necessary, but you know, nice to have, right? Up in front you have the SMA jack. Right now you got to remember, this thing is nice because you know, the jack is in front rather than at the back, so sometimes you can just, you know, conveniently put stuff in and out just like that. And it has 4 channels, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now whereas the Comtech receiver comes with 8 channels, this comes with 4 default. Of course internally it can do more channels, but as it's set up, only 4 channels, 1 to 4. And this yellow button here, when you press it, it will just toggle it channels 1, 2, 3, 4. And here of course is the standard SMA connector, you put that in. Alright, so that's your receiver. And what we have next up here is a Chinese receiver, very bulky, solid metal box. It's a little bit black, so I'm gonna hope that comes out nicely in the video. Now at the back here, you don't have much. You have a thin socket that brings out pigtail like this. So you have the stereo sound. You have the stereo sound, okay, left and right here. You have the power, and you have the video, right? The antenna is stuck, okay, so you can't remove that. If you want to do something about that, you will have to cut the whole thing out and then put your own SMA plug on it. I might just do that later on, but for this test, I'm just going to leave it as it is. Up front, you have two switches here, and they apparently go through some 8 channels, right? So you can 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of these switches will help you switch the first set or second set of signals. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to actually set this whole thing up. I'm going to record some of these images, the videos, and we're going to just look at it, and you can be judged for yourself which one you like best in terms of color I quality, sharpness, cleanness. Because there's a little something here. I'm not supposed to talk about that, but well, we'll see how. If I get around, I might just test it. Otherwise, I won't. All right, I can't tell you about that because then I have to kill you. But being a priest and all, I shouldn't be killing people. All right, so that's that. Alright, and just a quick word about our test setup. We're going to be recording our videos using a mini DV based camcorder. Now you see two here that I use. The one that I will be using is this Sony. Okay, very nice. It actually has a little place for the cable to go in. Alright, down here you can see that. There's a little hatch here, so when you open that, you can have that connected to your AV socket. You can see that. Alright, so this is good because it does fairly good recording, and mini DV is actually very good bit rate. You're getting probably over 20 megabits of data there. Now I used to use this Panasonic, but it appears that Panasonic does some distortions to the color, so I was getting some fairly strange color renditions with the Panasonic, so I don't use that anymore, but I use this mainly as a tape deck. Alright, you don't want to wear out the heads, so we are going to be doing the test with this Sony. Alright, this is the model of this is HC42E. Alright, that's DCR HC42E, and I'm recording in PAL. This one was the NVGS6. Okay, that's the basic setup for our transmission. This is my partially built glider which I'm testing. So you have the full OSD, the battery, the OSD, and the camera out there. So this is our source of signal for our first part of our test. And then over here you have the mess of wires, which is what I'm actually connecting up. And we will also be looking at the some of the trays from the scope here, just to evaluate a little bit more carefully what's going on here. Alright. This first clip comes from the Lawmate receiver. There's a little bit of streaking in the white text at the top line that we can see, and also a little bit of color bleeding where the lines are thinner on the text itself. So that is due to the high resolution. Other than that, the picture looks quite alright. A little bit of Wi-Fi noise here and there. A little bit noisy. I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. We will look into that. This next clip comes from the IF receiver. It is quite clear that it is better. You can see there's no white streaks at the top, and the amount of color bleeding is a little bit less, even though it's there. If you look at the compass, that's especially evident. But you know, I mean, this is a limitation of the video mode, so there will always be a little bit of color bleeding with high resolution text like that. This last clip comes from the unknown brand Chinese receiver. Fair picture, no white streaks on the text at the top, and also minimal color bleeding, even better than the IF receiver, I would say, probably due to good filtering. Now if you look carefully, you'll notice that the top line of text is a little bit skewed, and that's evidence of some problems with the sync signals. Now when we look in detail at the trace, and this is the trace of the video line signal from the Lawmate receiver, you will see that there are two blue color cyan lines, and that indicates 208 millivolts between the blanking and the middle of the color burst signal. So the standard is about 285. 200 is not too bad. 208 is pretty good actually. Now what is most interesting here is that if you look at the beginning of the line data, you see a sharp spike to the top, and that is unusual. That shouldn't be there. That will result in ringing or some kind of a video bounce. So we will have to look into exactly what is causing this, because this will degrade your picture in some instances, and I will give you an example of that later on. Now this next trace comes from the IF receiver. The first thing that you can tell is that the voltage levels are a little bit lower, and between the cyan lines you have about 180 millivolts of signals, so that's a little bit less than you got with the Lawmate receiver. Now what is common though is that you have that spike at the beginning of that line data, and that's that's a problem we will have to resolve actually if you want to have a good picture. This will result in ringing, some sort of ghosting lines on the top left. So other than that, it appears to be cleaner across the board, less noisy, more controlled color burst signals, for example. Last of all, we have this trace from the unknown Chinese receiver, and you can see that the voltage levels are actually really low here, and the level between the blanking and the color burst is only 128 millivolts, and that is representative of the voltage variations across the signal. I think this exceptionally low signal level is the cause of the poor syncing, which resulted in the skewed text at the top. Now all of these videos were feeding into my Sony camcorder receiver, so that's presenting a standard 75 ohms load, so that should be our normal operating situation. But here's the good thing, it doesn't have that spike at the beginning, or at least not a noticeable one. So some good news, but also some bad news with the voltage level. And in some of these cases, the recorder can adjust for the levels, but if it's too low, then you get syncing problems. Okay, we've done a number of tests now. We have one last test. It's the weak signal test, and I'm just going to play 3 clips side by side, and this will include the audio. So what you're listening to will be the audio from the unmodulated line, so there's no microphone attached. It's just the free line there. So some of this you'll notice that there's a little bit of noise in background. That comes from the from the receiver itself. Alright, so just do take note of that, and you can just compare. Now I have Wi-Fi going on in the background, and that is introducing some interference. So I also want to see how these receivers handle the impact of your Wi-Fi. Okay, we have come to the end of this test. As you saw from the last 3 clips, the Lawmate receiver has a little bit of background noise and is more susceptible to Wi-Fi interference than all the rest. Picture is a little bit noisy. The IF receiver done exceptionally well. It did exceptionally well. Was very resistant to Wi-Fi noise, probably better in-band filtering, and also you have the unbranded one, which was a little bit better in terms of Wi-Fi rejection, but picture quality was just so-so. So I would have to say that coming out from this test, the Intelligent Flight receiver, 4-channel receiver, now it comes in a slightly different casing now, but this one is probably the one that did the best of the lot. I probably should add that the channels need to be aligned with the frequency of the transmitters. They are not always aligned, and sometimes you need to make sure that the frequencies are correctly selected. So for channels 1 and 4 are aligned between the low mid transmitters and the IF receiver.